Out of all the literary creations in human history, I don't think any has been more thoroughly run into the ground than Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. At the time of making this video, old Victor and his monster have been adapted for the big and small screen no fewer than 991 times, in more than 400 feature films, 200 shorts, almost 80 different series and nearly 300 episodes of TV. Over the past 100 years or so, Hollywood writers and directors have portrayed the famous monster as everything from a big lumbering object of terror to a tragic romantic anti-hero to a comically goofy figure of fun and even to a fucking action star for some reason. That is a whole lot of content right there, and it does beg the question, what's even left to explore with this story? What can anyone do that hasn't been done 100 times already? Well, according to Guillermo del Toro, there's still a lot of mileage left in everyone's favourite reanimated corpse with the release of his latest feature film, imaginatively titled Frankenstein. I mean, the cast is definitely impressive, that's for sure. Oscar Isaac, Christoph Waltz and Charles Dance are just some of the big names attached to it. Del Toro himself has a mostly good pedigree when it comes to dark fantasy movies like this. And with the release of Nosferatu back at the start of the year, there seems to be growing appetite for revisiting classic horror stories with faithful modern adaptations. That's nice and all, but is Frankenstein actually any good? Is it worth your time? Well, yeah, it is. I mean, it's not exactly breaking new ground in narrative terms, and if you've read the original book or even watched the Kenneth Branagh movie from back in the 90s, then you're not in for any big surprises because it's an almost beat-for-beat remake, but what it does do, it does extremely well. Oscar Isaac is superb as the brilliant but deeply flawed scientist driven to inhuman excesses by his quest to conquer death itself, and he's balanced out by a captivating performance by Jacob Elordi as the creature, at times sympathetic and innocent, at others monstrous and barbaric. The direction and the cinematography are excellent, showcasing the mix of dirty, moody industrial and vibrant natural visuals that Del Toro's known for. And all of this is to say that Del Toro's Frankenstein is a solidly constructed movie and a pretty faithful adaptation of the source material that does its best to tell the story honestly and accurately, rather than put its own stamp on it or, God forbid, adapt it for modern audiences. You'll know the plot pretty well by now, so I'm not going to waste too much time on it. The movie kicks off in the frozen Arctic, where an exploration ship trapped in the ice picks up a wounded and dying Victor Frankenstein. When they bring him on board and he's recovered enough to talk, he relates the story of how he got there and the true nature of the monstrous creature that's now hunting him. A gifted scientist and a brilliant physician, Frankenstein was driven by the premature death of his mother to discover a way of bringing the dead back to life. His efforts eventually bore fruit with the creation of a creature made from pieces of dead bodies stitched together and then reanimated with lightning and science and stuff. I don't know, the movie never really explains how all this stuff works, but it's not like Mary Shelley did either. Anyway, Victor's joy at his own creation gradually sours when he realises it has no real intelligence, memory or ability to learn, and it can only growl a single word: Victor. Which gives it roughly half the vocabulary of your average Glaswegian, but let's stay on track with this one. As the creature gets stronger and more difficult to control, Victor decides to pull the plug on the whole endeavour and burns the castle to the ground with the creature still inside. Naturally, this doesn't work, and the creature escapes into the wilderness and befriends an old blind man, where it slowly learns how to speak and understand its own creation. And because it basically can't die now, the creature knows that it needs one thing to make life bearable.
Poontang.
A companion. So it tracks down Victor and it's like, hey buddy, any chance you could make me a girlfriend? Preferably one that doesn't look like Bella Ramsey after a close encounter with a weed whacker. But Victor's like,
No, I don't think I will.
So the creature's like, okay, guess I'll just kill everyone then.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
Victor vows revenge and hunts the creature to the furthest reaches of the earth, eventually tracking it all the way up to the Arctic, and so our tale comes full circle. As I said earlier, not many stories have been retold as many times as Frankenstein, and yeah, you could argue that just doing the same thing again probably isn't going to add a whole lot to the discourse around it, but I think there is still something to be said for taking the road well travelled, but doing it with skill, commitment and artistic flair. And really, that's what Del Toro achieves with this movie. The classic theme of man's reckless abuse of science to play God and its destructive consequences was basically created by Mary Shelley's original work, and so it's no surprise that it still forms the core of this movie. The creature itself isn't good or evil when it's brought to life, but instead a blank slate that could have become something better if only Frankenstein had the patience and compassion to understand it. And this is where I have to give props to Oscar Isaac, who proves why he's one of the few actors from the Star Wars sequels to go on to bigger and better things. The guy is magnetic on screen, manic and driven at times but deeply haunted and melancholy at others. A tragically flawed man of great potential but few morals, willing to cut corners and risk everything in the pursuit of his dream. But it's Jacob Elordi as the creature who really steals the show here. The way he goes from the childish innocence of his early creation to a sensitive and compassionate man desperately trying to find meaning in his existence, to a vengeful and destructive monster determined to take revenge on the only father he's ever known. A man he hates and loves at the same time. It's great stuff, and unlike so many other depictions of the creature where the actor's buried under prosthetics and makeup to amp up the body horror, this version's much more stripped back and grounded, and so it frees him up to do way more with the role. And believe me, he does. At 2.5 hours, this isn't exactly a short movie, but narratively there is a lot of ground to cover, and so the plot moves along at a fair clip, never lingering too long on one scene or event, but giving them just the right amount of time to breathe and settle in, giving you time to get to know the various characters and empathise with them. I don't know if this is ever going to be seen as the definitive adaptation of the Frankenstein story, but honestly, it's a pretty fucking good attempt. And if you're looking for a chance to revisit the most iconic of dark gothic stories, then well, you could probably do a lot worse than Del Toro's Frankenstein. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.